Hello, everybody. International trade, and we are in our, let's say, more descriptive model, the gravity model, and we are doing within this model a case study looking explicitly on the data of the United States. And yeah, this and afterwards I will switch for a general overview of the trade relations of Germany as an example, as a starting point for you when you should do your term paper and you should then analyze the trade relations of some other countries. And I will then, I think I said that you start after Eastern with your countries. So please give me until next week the feedback if you want to participate in the lecture, in the exam, and then the week after Easter, I will assign you your country and then you can start. Okay, so we were within the so-called gravity model, and well, we just started downloading the regional distribution of the trade relations of the United States. And then we just had a look at the data, looking in parallel on the largest export partners and the largest import partners. And then, yeah, we tried to explain why we find some specific countries trading the most or trading are within the 10s or 20s largest. And there we saw very surprisingly that some quite obvious things seem to drive the international trade relations. So the lower the distance between two trading partners, the higher is the trading volume, and also the larger the trading partners, also the larger are the trade volumes. And then we also find some special reasons, for example, looking at United Kingdom, that they are somehow a traditional trading partner with the United States. Well, they have more or less the same history, and the United States are mainly or the foundation of the United States are mainly driven by people who have moved from UK and Ireland. So they have mainly the same cultural background, and of course also if you are talking the same language, then we could think that it is more easy to trade with each other. Then it was quite astonishing to find a smaller country in at the number 5 of the largest export partners in the Netherlands. But also, if we look then what is specific about Ireland, about Netherlands, then of course we find the harbor of Rotterdam, which we can more or less call that this is not the harbor of the Netherlands, but this is the harbor of Europe or the European Union, and that then many products at first will be exported or will come to the Netherlands, or the other way around, that Netherlands are exporting. Where we find it, well, it's number 20, not that much, but that the United States are exporting at first to the Netherlands. That is then also not such a surprise. And what else did we have? Well, if you then, and this I will not doing in that detail here, But this you could do. Then I showed you also in the database that there you can select also due to categories, and Taiwan as the fourth largest importer for the United States. Uh, at first, a surprise, but then if we look especially at electronics and high performance chips, which they especially need in the United States for all the tech companies and all the cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and so on, then it is also not such a surprise that we find at a very high position Taiwan in the trading relations of with the United States. Well, and then, oops, where is it? Oh yeah, then I just switched yesterday. Directly, we will do another case study where we will quantitatively do a little analysis looking how so to speak, how good is our argument. The larger the country, the larger is the trade volume. But at first, let's just went through what we understand by distance. That in here we talk in general. If we talk in general of distance, that this not only means how far away measured in kilometers is the distance between two trading partners, although this is one of the main causes, but that we find as as already said, also other reasons which determine a general distance, and that this is this cultural affinity. We had the example UK and United States. Geography, there we had the example with Netherlands and the United States, and in general geography, if you look also at two countries which are in distance neighbors, but if you find there then high mountains in between, that this is of course hindering the trade relations. And on the other hand, if you have the possibility to build a large harbor, that this is increasing the trade relations. Well, and at this point we stopped yesterday, and then there is a fourth dimension where we in general look at borders, and borders could be physical. If you look before 1990, the borders between the communist part of the world and the so-called capitalist Western Europe, United States, then it was quite hard to move between these borders, and we almost, with the exception of energy, we took always from the Soviet Union, but other goods we have not traded very much between these two blocks. And so we can also look in general at borders, and borders means then in general, well, do we have specific formalities when we are moving from one country to to another, and these formalities we drastically decreased within Europe because we have the European Union, and there we more or less created a free market without obstacles. And this is, of course, fostering then international trade. And we have again one specific example where we can look directly into the data. What does it mean quantitatively if you are changing from a regime of more or less a free trade union to obstacles via formalities? And this is just when UK has left the European Union. And there you really, if you go into the data, you see the decrease of the trade volume between UK and the European Union. So if you look then in the bilateral trade relations between Germany and UK, then you say there a drastic decrease between these two countries and in general between the relations of UK and the European Union. And then right now we have the process of a new trade union of the European Union and South America, Mercosur. This is then a free trade union between these two economic regions. And there we will see what kind of effect this will have in the next years. Well, and then, of course, we will later on talk about this topic, of course, in more detail. Another obstacle, not only formalities, but of course, if we have a direct impact of the government via increasing the prices, increasing tariffs, the most loved word of Mr. Trump, as he said. So these borders in general then can implicitly or explicit via tariffs reduce the trade volumes. And then we can say, and there you have then, yeah, a coincidence of these two dimensions. We can also say, well, borders, language borders, so to speak. There we find also an, a dependence on the trade volumes. And also this not then in general in the European Union, but in the Eurozone, so in the European Monetary Union, we also decreased an obstacle for trade via the introduction of one currency for this region, because of course then you have not anymore the exchange rate risk when you are selling or buying something from abroad. And then when this model was invented, there was then found quantitatively a fifth dimension, and this was due to when you look in the production possibilities of a country, then you find that if in one country you find a so-called multinational firm, a multinational corporation, that this is also fostering international trade relations. Well, this is also not very surprisingly, because then you could say, well, there are then different sub departments of the same cooperation, one in Germany, one in UK, and one in the United States, and that then these sub departments of the same cooperation start to trade within a corporation easier than if compared to the situation if this would be different corporations. This is yeah, of course, also quite obvious. And well, then you say, of course, not this reasoning is not very relevant if the corporations are quite small, because we are here talking about the overall trade relations. But in general, these multinational corporations are quite large. Think again, if we look at the exchange of services, if you look at the great or the large tech firms in the world, or the large production firms in the automotive sector, or in the electric sector, like in Germany, Siemens, or in the chemical industry, BASF, and so on, because these corporations then trade easier goods between their sub-departments. Okay, but if we go on, and then we will make also a little case study on these different dimensions. At first, this we had in terms greater distance means here. This we also held already. And then I want to do another case study where we more or less saw this descriptive model. We want to want to go into more detail when we want to look now in the trade volume between the Eurozone and the US, and then look what is then the part of the different countries of the Eurozone trading with the United States. And then we will add to this analysis the two neighbors, Mexico and Canada, and then we will see what kind of impact this will have on our analysis. And for this, we will do a little linear regression. The guys who has already participated in my global economics course, they know what is then to do. Okay, so then we went to our file, and this is GDP, and here we have exports and imports, and then let's do the analysis EU and US. And for this, then let's use here all EU countries. There we have Netherlands and Germany exports. And we need, yeah, exports. And later on we need here the imports. But, Brazil, France. Oh, then I can do it. France, Italy, Belgium, Spain, Ireland, Poland, Eurozone I wanted to use. Or Eurozone, yeah. Poland North, Denmark North, Portugal, Lithuania and Greece, Slovakia, there, Yes, thank you. Luxembourg. Malta. So we are almost done. Latvia. Slovenia. And let's see. Finland is there and there. The newest one is Bulgaria. Let's see. So we have 16. Some are missing. Who is missing? Netherlands. We have Luxembourg. Italy. No, Italy we have. Who is missing? Austria. There. Uh, 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 Croatia. Now we are almost done. Um, I don't see it directly. In this case, we just asked the internet. Eurozone, or you help me if you want. So here we are. Estonia is missing. Latvia, Lithuania we have. Cyprus, Estonia and Cyprus, I think. Hmm? And Cyprus. Now we are done, or no, this is 20, no? No, 21. So we are done. Great. So then we need also the imports. Netherlands, Germany, France. Netherlands. Germany. France. Where's France? There. Italy. There's one. Belgium. There you see also Belgium and Spain are in the neighborhood. And again, we have the harbor. Antwerpen, not that large as the harbor of Rotterdam, but the second largest. This was Austria. Finland. Slovakia. Portugal. Well, and this is what I have to learn. This was Greece, because I think that if I have the data set, that now I can start to do this work with the artificial intelligence, that they are just sorting my data, what I'm doing right now for with my hand. And I really recommend that you start to learn how to do this with artificial intelligence. I will do this over time. Again. Cyprus, I directly see. Well, and then which one are left? Estonia, Croatia, Bulgaria. Estonia. Croatia. Bulgaria. Where is it? Where is it? There. No, there. Oops. Yeah, I see that. See it. So there we are. Bulgaria and Slovenia and Ireland, and then we are done. Lithuania and Ireland. Ireland, there. Oh, I overlooked it. So, what else do we need? Well, we want to have the dependence between trade volume and size, economic size. So we also need the GDP of these countries. And then let's have a look. I think there also I had already the data here. This was GDP. So Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and Belgium, Ireland. Where is Belgium? Belgium's there. Ireland is there. So, Portugal. Well, I admit that what I'm right now doing is quite boring, but this is what I want from you. Because of course in a lecture I can always plot you all diagrams, tables, and that's it. And my experience is, and I have done this in my studies, I think in the same way that you just take it as the data is just given. And then if you have for yourself the task, please start to dig a little bit into the data. Then you are not used to it and you don't know, well, what do I have to do? And sometimes, and especially if you go to international databases, then the format and the possibility how you can download and that you can really work with the data is always a mess. And there you have to create a specific strategy for your own how to deal with these problems. And therefore, Slovakia is there. I do in real time now these quite boring things because that's what you then have to do. And I said it to you that we can start to use for this work artificial intelligence, but then of course also you have to be used to it using AI. Lithuania, and this was here. Slovenia. Because always what is done by students and what you also see in studies and sometimes is just a copy and paste of diagrams which has been created in other studies by other people before. And the problem, just taking out these tables and diagrams is that quite often these diagrams and tables are not the answer for your specific question you have, because these authors, they had other tasks to do why they have created some specific tables and diagrams. And then always only copy and pasting using the snipping tool, taking these diagrams out of a PDF or so. Well, as a first step, okay, but then for a good paper, you have to do a little bit more work. Cypress. And maybe since I'm doing this now with you together, that this means if you have your task then given by me, that I will not be very happy if I find in your term papers always only a copy or paste of data out of other studies. Because I want from you that you go into the data by yourself. So then some are left. Luxembourg, Latvia, Finland. This is, I think, written with OU. Luxembourg, Latvia. Finland, Austria, and Estonia. Hoppala. Misspelled. Oops. Still misspelled. Oh, this is the wrong data. Ah, shit. Finland was here. This one is also the wrong data. Something else, Luxembourg 2. The other ones are the right ones. So Luxembourg again. And Latvia. Ah, again, I used the wrong one. There we are. Luxembourg, Austria. And Estonia. So let's see if this is all right. Comma, 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 comma. Okay. Oh, Netherlands is missing. Netherlands should be somewhere here. So now we are done. Well, we could now go into specific doing the analysis with export and import separately. Let's do the analysis with a trade volume overall. So we just add exports and imports. And I think this was the units, GDP in billion dollars and $1,000. So, and here we have GDP in billion dollars. This I recommend you are also always doing, because then next week you are opening your file and you do not know anymore what your data means. Okay, so this is then the trade volume. Well, we have now different units, and well, you could do this in an absolute sense, but this we are doing quite often in economics, that we want to use numbers without a unit and that we are talking in relative numbers. So for this, we then sum up all numbers for GDP of all Eurozone members. So we obtain the overall GDP size of the Eurozone and the overall trade volume of the Eurozone with the United States. And then we can calculate the relative size with respect to the overall size of the European Union of Germany, of the European Union. So how much percent is the German GDP relative to the size of the Eurozone, and the same we are doing for the trade volumes. So this would be then GDP over total GDP, and this we have to fix. And in order to fix, because we want to divide always by the same number, and this you can do that you are insert a dollar sign in front of the letter and the number simultaneously, or you are using F4. Oops. Is it still working? Yeah. Then it's done automatically. This is quite low. F3 over F24.
I have a question.
Yep, for sure.
I think since the exports and imports are in $1,000 and
Mhm.
GDP is in billion, I think we have to transform the numbers.
Since we are in the end only interested in the relative numbers, actually this doesn't matter, yeah? Because then the units are canceling, okay? But a good question, yeah? But I think I've done something wrong here, because this seems to be a very small number. The result of total GDP. Yeah, this is too large. F3. But why? Where is the very large number? Oh, Luxembourg here again. This is the export number. This is still the wrong data. I think I copied 3 times the wrong number. But this mistake is also, I think, quite nice that this has happened. Because if you have a feeling or you know in general how large something should be, then you are directly see, well, there cannot be something true in my data set. So hopefully now I use the right data. This one. Yeah. So this is more reasonable that 7% of the size of the European Union is Netherlands. So then we copy this down. And for Germany in general, you can have in your head it is always somehow 1/4 in size. And the same we are doing with the exports and imports. And if you just copy it to the right, then everything is moving one column, and therefore you do not have to retype the formulas. Let's call this in percent and the trade volume in percent. Oops. So now we have our data and that I have directly the country names. Let's copy these into here. No, for this I then later on, do I have my label? Oh, not here. My label possibility, my label app is not. Let's see if I can do this. Because later on, I of course want to know which data point is which, and XY label. Um, this is an option do you have. Hopefully I can. Oops. Mm, no questions. Download. There it is. And desktop. So now I think I at first have to close my Excel and then desktop. I hope that I have the rights to install it. But I think so. So now having these, back again. There it is. Great. So now I will just plot these two variables with respect to each other. For this here, I choose the XY oops, I already went in because, well, we want to analyze the hypothesis. The larger a country, the larger the trade volume. So if I now create this diagram, plotting all these points, so GDP, relative size of GDP of Netherlands, relative size of trade volume of Netherlands of the EU with the United States, and this for every country. If our hypothesis is okay, what kind of diagram would you expect? So where should we find our data points? Yeah, and what kind of line? Can you go into more detail? So there should be some cloud around a line, yeah. And to be more specific, where shall we find this line? Because it could be a horizontal, can be a vertical, it can be an increasing, it can be a decreasing line. Increasing, yes. And if this is, so to speak, totally true, if we assume we have a one-to-one mapping between these two variables, what kind of line should it then be? You can say it's a line, it's increasing, and then a straight, of course, a straight line. And if what I mean a total dependence due to this qualitative statement, the larger the larger the economic size, the larger the trade volume. So what I mean, if the hypothesis is even stronger, that I say, if my size is increasing by 5 percentage points, that then also the trade volume is increasing by 5 percentage points. What kind of straight line should it then be? Hmm? Internet? Do you have an idea? Because in the internet, I know that you are also participating in statistics, or no? With a positive slope, yeah, this we have already said. It's increasing, but you can say something about the number of the positive slope. Hmm? 5% to the right and 5% upwards percentage points means a slope of 1. And then we can also say if we become smaller and smaller and smaller, and even Liechtenstein or Vatican, then we should start in the origin. Okay, so this is what we, if our hypothesis is okay, we would expect. And here we are. Uh, oh, this one is wrong still. These numbers I have. Yeah, because here we have to divide all numbers by g. And this is again wrong. G. And then down here. Well, so these are our data points. And well, let's see. Let's make a square out of it, or roughly. So it seems quite okay. So if we look at it here, oh, this number here, which data point is this? This is Germany. So I said here. So this is, I have to go into the diagram. which is which. I always do not know. So I is X and J is Y. Let's add this too. So this is then trade in percent, and this is GDP in percent, and then we should also have it in percent. And here we done. Well, and then we see, well, 27 in GDP size, 25 almost, because then we would expect 25, 25. Or here, roughly 18, well, not directly 14, but it is in the neighborhood. Well, and then we can make the linear regression. And a linear regression is we want to fit a linear line in such a way that the squared distances of our data point is uh, um, is the lowest due to our fitted line. And this you can do in your software package just with this, add a trend line, and then you have here different kinds of functions which you want to fit. And here we have the option linear, and then we want to always also have the formula behind it. And there, our expectation is that the vertical cut of the cut of the vertical axis is near at 0, and the slope is near in the neighborhood of 1. And let's also add the variable, the determinant, the coefficient of determination. So, and then here we are. This is our result, a slope of 0.85, quite close to 1, a cut of the vertical axis of 0, of 0.0075, almost directly 0, and the coefficient of determination is 0.75, and maybe this has been already explained to you. This number you can interpret as that your hypothesis that a linear line is a fit of your data, then you can interpret this number of 0.75 that this hypothesis is explaining 75% of your data set. So in general, if you are introducing linear regression, then from a descriptive standpoint, you say, well, an coefficient of determination starting at 0.6, 0.7, this is then that you say only from a descriptive standpoint, well, it's a quite okay fit. Yeah. If you have here a number 0.2 or 0.1, then you would also see that you have really a spread of the cloud around your linear line. Okay, let's take this one. Oh, I wanted also to add the countries, but before we take it, let's maybe ask. Here we already have said this is Germany, obviously the largest one in trade and GDP. This one here, with a quite small relative size of GDP, but a large trade volume, or let's say a medium size of GDP, because this down here, this will be then all our data points of Luxembourg, of Latvia, and so on. But this one, so a medium size country with a much relatively larger trade volume. Which country could this be then? Remember, at the starting point yesterday, we have talked about the US trade relations in general and also with some specific countries. Pardon? Ireland could be possible, but I would suppose that this is Ireland. We will see it in a minute. Well, 16%. Let's go into the data. Or has you been right? Oh, you are right. Great. So the explanation that the relative trade of Ireland is then even the second largest one. This is also, I actually thought it is another country. What would be, due to our general distance argument, the explanation that we find Ireland here? Yes, yes, that it is. Well, less tariffs, I don't think so. I think Ireland and the UK have similar tariffs than compared to the other countries. Um, and well, I thought that it is Netherlands due to Rotterdam, but even we see also Netherlands with 7% in size, but 13% also much larger in trade. So then I think now using this one here is add labels and the label range up. Okay, then I have to move here. And the label range would be then this one. And there we are. Yeah, so Ireland, cultural affinity, Netherlands, harbor, Belgium, harbor, and then maybe we can say that Spain, even a lower cultural affinity compared to France, compared to Germany, no harbor at the Atlantic Ocean. And so let's then take this into our data set, into our slides. And there then we have harbors, we have cultural affinity, but also in general the hypothesis of the larger the country, the larger the trade volume fits the data. Okay, and then let's add to this also, to these numbers, Mexico and Canada. Then I have to copy the numbers. Canada and Mexico. GDP is here. Canada. And Mexico is there. Mexico. And then we need exports and imports of Mexico and Canada. So Canada is this plus this. Oh yeah, this is Mexico. And then this is Canada. And then again the same calculation. And again, up, oh, this is divided by this one. And there you can F4 and then another times F4. Then the dollar in front of the letter is, oops, vanishing. Oop, no, everything is vanishing. No, because then, oops, we can copy it just to the left. And reformat this. One step to the right. All country names. And again, let's have a look. If we add these, oh, I'm not quite down. So, oops, and something else is missing. This is Mexico. Oop. And now it should work. Here we are. Again, trade in percent. Oops. And GDP. let's add the names. Well, and then of course we see if we do also the fit with a linear line, then you see of course one thing, that since Mexico and Canada, here the main explanation is not the size, but the neighborhood, and even their trade volume size is even much larger than the largest of the EU countries of Germany. Um, in general, we would say, okay, from the slope and the cut of the vertical axis, it still seemed to fit our hypothesis, but we are now, what we see, adding these two outliers in the data set. We have 23 data points, only so to speak, two very drastical outliers. They drop down the coefficient of determination, so the explanation character of our hypothesis. So only 25% is explained with the linear line, and here we have 75% of explanation. Yeah, and this is, somehow to go a little bit deeper into the data and not only looking at directly looking, well, who has the largest trade volume or not, but then starting a bit with an analysis of the data. Does my hypothesis really fit my assumptions? Okay, then I wanted to explain to you why is it called the gravity model. And yeah, what we then say, well, you can then take in general, try to develop an overall function which catches our two assumptions. The larger the countries, the larger the trading partners, the larger is their trading volume, and the larger the distance, the lower is the trading volume. And in order to find a function with which we can describe these two qualitative assumptions, then we can use just a function where we say, okay, the trading volume between two countries is at first the product of their GDPs. Why do we take the product? Also, the larger the country, the larger the trading volume, the sum would also fit these assumption. But keep in mind, for example, if we look at the situation not between USA and Germany, so the largest country in the world and the third largest one, but the trading volume between United States and Luxembourg. Then, if we would assume just the sum of both, adding GDP of Luxembourg to the GDP of of the United States wouldn't change anything because Luxembourg is much smaller than the United States. But of course, if you have a very large country trading with a very small country, then of course the overall trade volume should be much decreased because of this asymmetry. Because Luxembourg can only buy a small number of goods from the United States and also export a small number. And of course, a large number times a small number is then in the end some medium sized number and not the same number as before when you have the sum. And then the distance, what this would mean, well, we want a decreasing function. The first idea would be, well, let's just subtract it. But there we have one problem that we would say, okay, then this distance we have to also to measure in euros. How to measure a distance in euros is not that easy. And you would also have the problem that we would say, okay, if the number we are subtracting is larger than the positive number of the product of the two GDPs, then we would obtain a minus number for the trade volume. And this is also not a nice feature of such a function. And therefore, we use, so to speak, the next easiest form. How can we create a decreasing function? And this means we just dividing by this variable. So divided by the distance. And this is then the explanation why we call this the gravity model of international trade. Because maybe in physics, in your school times, you have heard of the law of gravity found by Isaac Newton in the 17th century. And he has found that he can very well replicate the data of the planets moving around the sun if we assume that gravity is a force between these uh, between the sun and the planets, or the planets and the planets, of course, that you take the product of the mass of the sun of and the planet divided by here now the square of the distance. And you have also some constant of gravitation. We introduce then, moving again back to our to economics, also such a constant. This is always that you can somehow renormalize it because also here you are dividing in general US dollars times US dollars by some distance unit and introducing then such a constant. You can normalize with this constant that in the end we want to get an output where we have also trade volume measured in measured oops, in US dollars. And what we then also add is that we introduce three exponents on every variable we have, so on the GDPs and the distance, and introducing the exponents. Reason for alpha, beta, and gamma is that we can very nicely interpret these exponents as the trade elasticity of GDP of A, GDP of B, and the distance. Do you remember what an elasticity is? Yeah, but this is only the qualitative. We are now argument. What is an elasticity? I think you have talked about demand elasticities, for example, or income elasticities. What is it? In microeconomics, but hopefully not only in microeconomics. Because elasticities are, in my opinion, the most important quantitative numbers which you have for economic interpretations. Well, the elasticity is the relative change of two variables. So if when you have talked about demand elasticity, the price elasticity of demand, then you ask, well, how much is in percent my demand decreasing if I'm increasing the price by 1%? Or income elasticity, how much is my demand increasing if we have a normal good in percent when I'm increasing my income by 1%? So these numbers can be interpreted as how much is the increase in percent of the trade volume if the GDP of one country is increasing by 1%. And the same for GDP of country two, and the same for the distance. And yeah, and the last one is that if you have such a functional form, then with this functional form, you can also do easily an economic analysis, an econometric analysis, since you can linearize this function. Do you know how you can linearize this function? That again, you have just a sum of different variables. Well, linearization, because I'm in the overtime, via taking logs. And this means if we take ln of C GDP A to alpha GDP B beta over distance to the power of gamma, how can we rewrite this? What is the log of x times y? That's a pity. In economics, you need straight lines, square roots, x squared, x3, something like this, 1 over x, exponential function, and log function. It's only 7 functions. And you should know how to calculate with them, and you should know how they look like. So the log of the multiplication of two variables of the product is just the sum of the logs of each other. And this, from this, you can then also derive that log of x with some exponent is nothing else than log of x times x n times. And you can use then the main functional law of logs, that this is then also n times the log of x. So the exponent is just in moving in front of the log. So we obtain then ln c plus alpha ln GDP a plus beta ln GDP power of gamma minus gamma ln, oops, not this exponent of d And then you have new variables, and you can fit the data with a new multiple linear regression. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much.